presentation. So without further ado, I'll start the session. Website optimization is something which is quite close to our hearts. We talk about it all the time. We do it on a day-to-day basis. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about today really has come from things we've heard from people we talk to, people we work with, challenges that we see come up time and time again. And I suppose our response to these challenges in terms of what is an optimal website experience and how you can leverage data, channels, technology, etc., to deliver an experience that's going to resonate with your end users, your customers, but ultimately help support whatever specific business goal that you have. And in terms of, I suppose, the foundational, steps towards that route and road to success, some of the things we're going to talk about today. Fundamental one, how can we design the experience around the customer, around the multiple customers that you are targeting, the different regions you may be going after, taking into account a myriad of products and services that your organization may provide. How can we look at the digital experience from the viewpoint of your customer? And then secondly, how can we understand who your customers are digitally, online, who's engaging with any of your channels at a given moment, and what content can we use to engage them in the moment, and what does engage in the moment look like? And thirdly, ultimately, we're going to be talking a lot about, I suppose, from a high level, the optimal design of best approach to optimizing the website experience. But ultimately, everything we are talking about today requires an element of technology to deliver on the things we're talking about. And we'll come to that later on in today's session as well. So we always like to encapsulate the the website experience, optimizing the experience from the customer's point of view in terms of end-to-end. And from that, we mean it could be, for example, from the moment a customer of yours clicks on a paid ad to the moment they complete a hard action, such as buying a product, signing up for a service, transacting something on your website. And we like to look at it from the perspective of the end-to-end experience, because sometimes we can become quite focused on optimizing within a single channel. And that obviously has its benefits, but also it has its limitations in terms of optimizing for a specific channel, such as take email or paid campaigns, can optimize up to a certain point, but ultimately your customer is engaging with you across multiple channels and across a larger journey. And which is why we always say the first thing is always to design the experience around the customer, because from the customer's perspective, they're not engaging with a channel or website or an ad or a campaign or an email. They're engaging with you as a business, and they're looking to solve a specific problem that brought them to the site that day. And so we're going to be talking about how we better know our customers and how that is always the foundational point of designing the experience. But ultimately, knowing who your customers are doesn't necessarily tell us what type of experience we should be delivering for them. So we'll talk about designing the journey and ultimately the role of website optimization in continually tweaking, improving, and iterating those journeys. So it's not design once and forget, but looking to improve the experience over time. And to try and ground some of the things we're going to talk about today in reality, I'm going to talk about a fictional example of an insurance company to just ground some of the things we're going to be talking about in more detail later on, but also some of the things I've just mentioned already. And in terms of website optimization, we look to explore how this could be applied to different businesses based on the idea that we really need to get to know who your customers are. So in the example we're looking at today, we've taken one specific customer type persona for this fictional insurance company. And in this instance, we have a persona called Julia, who is researching family health insurance. Perhaps this has been triggered by some sort of external life event that has then led her to realize they need a need for insurance and go on a search for the right provider. And in terms of designing the experience around this fictional individual and this fictional insurance company, the way we look at it is to look at what would be her stages, her milestones, how she approaches this process. And from what we're going to talk about today, there are 4 main areas. And again, this is something which can be applied to your businesses today. So we're going to talk about loads of examples of real life companies and how this can be applied to real life organizations, because ultimately one of the things I'm quite keen on is that you go away and look at how you can apply some of the things we talk about today to your own businesses. And in this instance, we have sort of 4 key stage posts. Julia's initial research, then deeper research once you've drawn up an initial list of potential candidates for companies she could take out health insurance with, the application process and approval and onboarding. And the reason why it's important to look at the stages of each research phase is because there's a specific process from the customer's point of view that in this instance, Julia will transact. She will begin by, for example, searching for health insurance plans online. Perhaps she clicks a paid ad, which takes her to a potential supplier. There are loads of options in terms of products that they offer on this company, perhaps on other companies. Go away, speak to friends, solicit advice on other social media channels or from friends and relatives, and eventually come back with a couple of options. And it's important to understand that process during that initial research phase, because it will begin to surface opportunities in terms of the type of optimal experience we could deliver for Julia. So some examples can be within this phase, if we recognize an individual is at the early part of their journey with us and their journey in terms of researching products, are we able to recognize what channel they came from, for example, a paid ad? Are we able to pass over the parameters from, say, Google paid ad that allows us to know what campaign she clicked on, what keywords she clicked on, what specifically drove her to that page, and how can we leverage that in terms of an optimal experience? For example, can we A/B test the landing page or the A/B test the arrival based on that initial copy? Could we use personalization to surface relevant imagery or copy based on that initial ad? Do we look at other opportunities in terms of sort of next best channel in terms of how to keep her engaged with us? And through the process, looking at each stage, we will examine the specific process that this individual could potentially take with us once they decide they want to go more in depth in terms of the research, they revisit the website. Are we able to recognize that they're a returning visitor? And what can we do with that knowledge? If we have a more complex offering and we can see that they are returning to the site, but not adding something to a basket, for example, could we look to gently direct them into a different direction? So could we surface options such as a chatbot or a easy telephone number that they could speak to a offline representative to help guide them through the process? But the idea being to recognize what they're doing and to identify those opportunities that we could use in terms of delivering a better experience. And we take this through the process through to application, because ultimately we want to convert our potential visitors and prospect customers into paying customers. So what does each stage of the process look like, right through to adding something to basket, the checkout process, Are we able to simplify the process? Can we allow for opportunities such as we have a long form, as this is an insurance example? Can we allow a customer to part save a form and return the complete later on? Or can we provide other opportunities such as driving them in the direction of offline sales teams, but providing those offline sales teams with part completed forms so they're not starting the process from scratch? And so on, really, right through to onboarding and them as a customer. But the idea being, if you was to apply this to your own business, is to look at it in terms of what are those staging posts for the customer, what would be that process, map it out for each customer, and then begin to look at what are those digital opportunities that we could put in place for that customer. And we always say, don't be limited by what technology you have in place or what you can potentially do. Design it around the customer, design it around the type of experience you want to deliver, and then look at how you can then execute on this in terms of, do we have the right technology in place? Do we need anything else? Is our tools connected in order to allow us to do this? But let the strategy guide the use of tools to deliver this type of process. And one of the things which comes up in regular conversation with our clients is a couple of things, really. Is we always hear there's so much we could do, we're not sure where to start. This seems, it can be quite complex in terms of delivering an optimized website experience or optimizing our customer journeys. And the truth is, it's not necessarily easy. There's lots that you can do, and it's also hard to know what you should focus on initially, what's going to drive the most value. And the things we see as blockers time and time again, or there's things which customers fear are blockers, which are not necessarily so. So we hear things such as, we lack that sort of single view of the customer. We don't really feel like we've got a good handle on who our customers are and how they're engaging with us online. We can't action information held in one platform on another due to a lack of integration. So at a basic level, this could be we want to deliver, say, a personalized scenario on an app, or based on information we've captured on their website engagement, but the two systems are not engaged, not connected. We don't truly understand the characteristics of our core customers and how to target them online. One that comes up time and time again, we're not sure how to prioritize improvements through our channels. We need to understand where in the journey are people dropping off and why. And again, that can be a massive challenge because sometimes it can appear a black hole looking at analytics in terms of we know people are engaging, we know people are dropping off, but we're not sure why and where and what we can do to improve the situation. And the final one really is around, we're not sure what role marketing technology should play in scaling and delivering any of these type of approaches. So the first one we're going to talk about is data and knowing your customer. We mentioned before that, in our opinion, that building the experience around your customer is the #1 priority. And to do that, we always look at it from the customer's point of view, look at trying to identify how many customer segments you have, look at traditional activities such as persona workshops. We're going to talk about that in a bit more detail shortly. But ultimately, look at the data that you have at the moment in terms of analytics data, qualitative and quantitative data. So that could be things like heat mapping tools to build up a more robust picture of who your customers are. Because as in the process I laid out earlier with our fictional insurance company, we want to define the process for those customers and then define those opportunities, but those opportunities support that optimal experience. And one of the areas that we see is in terms of creating personas. So lots of businesses have invested in persona workshops, creating lots of personas. which are useful in many respects, but sometimes are less useful. So we see their maximum use traditionally in terms of new website projects. So people go through the persona research phase and then use that to define their what their new website should look like, and perhaps in terms of the design, the layout of information architecture, etc. Where that falls down in terms of continual website optimization and I suppose optimizing those end-to-end customer journeys is in what happens after that website has been created. How can you use that persona to improve the experience? And where we see drawbacks is in terms of the disconnect between that persona and understanding how to improve the experience for that specific persona type online, which is why we prefer the actionable personas framework. And again, it kind of came out in that insurance example before, but the difference between actionable personas and traditional personas really is in identifying digital opportunities that you could use to improve the experience for them as individuals. We're going to talk about technology a bit afterwards. One of the things that comes up is, being able to recognize who your personas are online. And that's the role of technology, customer data platforms, analytics, measurement frameworks. That's that role of technology, marketing technology plays in creating and recognizing who those customers are, and then allowing you to then translate an offline persona to something online so you can begin to recognize who customers are. And journey orchestration. From our perspective, we want to optimize the end-to-end experience for those customers. We want to deliver something that's optimal throughout those channels. So from the moment someone clicks an ad, through the moment that they purchase your insurance product, or if you're a membership organization, sign up to be a member, etc. What we want to do is to look at what are those friction points throughout that journey and look at how we can improve it. And there are three core areas that we've identified in terms of orchestrating and optimizing those customer journeys, from how can we show highly targeted content to an audience that we deeply understand, based on that deeper research around customer personas and applying those online. How can we use marketing technology to engage, re-engage, and convert that audience at scale? And the role of personalized messaging at each point in the funnel. And we talked briefly about customer funnels before in the insurance example, but I would like to take that a little bit further in another example. So the example we have on your screens at the moment is for Vodafone. So a phone company that most people are probably familiar with. They are e-commerce, they're a transactional business. In terms of analyzing this site from the perspective of optimizing the website experience and orchestrating I suppose the optimal journey for that customer, we would look to identify what are those main milestones that a customer encounters throughout her journey with Vodafone. And from our perspective, there are a couple of key ones: the homepage, product listing, product page, cart page, checkout, etc. And just like with a B2B organization who look at their sales funnel, you can also look at the website experience from the perspective of a funnel. There are specific milestones that we would like a customer to take part in, and we can bracket those milestones in terms of a funnel. So in this example, we could identify the pre-checkout funnel and then the checkout funnel. And it's important to look at it from this perspective because this allows us to then understand in extreme detail how are they engaging within this part of their of the journey. What does the pre-checkout funnel look like from their perspective? How are they moving between homepage, the product listing, the product page, etc.? Can we identify areas of opportunity? because this allows us to analyze and prioritize our efforts. So if we're able to understand that X percentage is moving on from the homepage to product listing page, but are not necessarily moving on to a specific product page, we can look to narrow our optimization efforts on, say, for example, the product listing page, with the KPI of we want to move more users, more visitors from the product listing page to a product page. So what does our optimization efforts look like? How do we prioritize our testing plans, our personalization plans, UX redesign? Either way, it allows us to say we're going to focus our efforts this quarter or this month or this period on optimizing this part of their journey before moving on to the next section. And I take a step back. We gave some examples of stats of people moving between each part of that funnel. It's also important to put in place that data foundation, because if we don't have the right data foundation in place, it's hard for us to know what's working and what's not working. And when we talk about data foundation, we're not necessarily talking about, I suppose from a Google Analytics perspective of, looking at your bounce rates, etc. We want our data foundation to answer specific questions. So in this instance, things such as what features are important to users, which features are not being used, which features are helping drive conversions. We want our analytics, our data to answer these questions because it allows us to identify what those friction points are, but also allows us to put KPIs in place for the success or failure for these parts of the funnel, but also allows us to then prioritize testing ideas, for example, around improving the conversion rates for these sections. And when we talk about data, and sometimes we can be guilty about talking about analytics data and forgetting about everything else, but we always try and insist that you need to combine qualitative with quantitative data. So from a basic perspective, that is combining analytics data with other examples such as customer research surveys, heat mapping. Heat mapping is something which lots and lots of people we work with have, but actually it's a massively underutilized analysis feature that people have, especially when it's combined with a robust measurement framework in terms of, like we had in the previous slide, of what are those questions we want our data to answer. Because the data in analytics may imply that something is not working, but when it's combined with other types of data, such as heat mapping, we might discover that's actually not the case. But at minimum, we have, I suppose, more robust 360 view of that customer from a digital analysis perspective. And once we have all these foundations in place, or in terms of identifying, what is the specific funnel? So for your own businesses, what does that funnel look like? We can begin to look at experimentation ideas. What are the things we want to try out in terms of different experiences? That could be A/B testing, that could be UX redesigns of specific components or specific parts of the page. But we can begin to generate those ideas as a team and then begin to prioritize the ideas which are perhaps have the highest impact with the lowest amount of effort. And a lot of the things we've been talking about today rely on technology. So the reason why we've put this later on in the presentation and not earlier on is that technology can be misleading. From our perspective, half the effort is, 80% of the effort is always in the strategy and defining what good looks like and working backwards in terms of what do we need to put in place to achieve that. Ultimately, you require technology to deliver an optimal website experience. So even as something as simple as tools for A/B testing or connecting different technologies together to achieve that. But I wanted to start here really in terms of where should we allocate our technology efforts. I always say that you don't need to go out shopping for new bits of kit to do something. I would always say start with an audit of the platforms and tools that you have. People are always surprised by what they have in place. They're surprised by the features that their tools have. Platforms sometimes have been in situ for many years or bought by their predecessors. So sometimes the rationale of why those platforms or tools were bought has been lost as just general, traditional churn in terms of marketing teams happens. It's also important not to let marketing features within your, I suppose, MarTech stack define what you should do. You should let the strategy define that, let the design of the experience around that customer help you define what tools you need to deliver that experience. So whether it's A/B testing, personalization, whether it's looking to deliver a more joined up experience across 1, 2, 3, 4 different channels, but don't get suckered into getting excited about the features in your platform, because they may not be so relevant to your customers, and I suppose pushing the dial in terms of getting people to jump hoops from one part of the funnel to the next part. Also, with marketing features, these can create issues in terms of do we have the bandwidth as a marketing team to onboard and take on board new technology or run with new ways of marketing? So do we have the capacity to ideate our own test hypotheses? Do we have the ability to scale testing plans? Do we have the expertise to run things like personalization? Do we have the in-house ability to integrate different bits of technology together? And also, after that initial audit, you may discover that there's parts of your marketing stack that you're not getting value from, that are not necessary in terms of the ideal experience you want to deliver for that customer. So, do you need those tools? Do you downgrade to a different version? Or does this now create opportunities for identifying different technologies which genuinely add value to your customers, but fit a gap that you have within your overall tech stack? But I suppose the long and short of it is, no need to run out and buy, the coolest bit of kit out there. Look at what you got first and look at it as a project like anything else. And we're coming to the end, and I wanted to finish off with the role of personalization, really, in terms of delivering that optimal website experience. And everything we've talked about today, we could talk about like for hours in great depth. So today we wanted to really just give you a flavor of some of the key areas that we see and feel is important in terms of optimizing that end-to-end customer experience. But in terms of personalization and the role of personalization, there are 3 key areas that we see: sense, simplify, and sell. So we're going to focus on sense today, and this really feeds back to that slide I had earlier in the presentation around knowing who your customer is, personas, etc., and the disconnect that marketing teams sometimes have with persona projects, and then the ability to then recognize digitally who their customers are. So most people just look at analytics and just see a faceless, see lots of numbers with no faces behind those numbers. We don't know which groups they fit into, etc. And personalization thrives on the ability to sense and understand who those customers are and identify them within, I suppose, the parameters of defined segments and customer types. And we're going to talk about sense today because we're going to do another session next month where we go into a lot more detail in terms of how to apply one-to-one experiences, the different types of customers types out there, whether you're a membership organization or insurance company or a private bank, the role that personalization plays for different types of businesses. So we're going to go into more depth next month. But in terms of people on the call today, the role of technologies like customer data platforms play is in allowing you as an organization to pick up on those sense patterns of, the things people leave behind when they engage with you, the clues they leave behind. So marketing technology and customer data platforms allow us to identify things such as, are you a returning visitor? What campaign have you engaged with? What series of keywords did you engage with on a campaign? When you came to the site previously, what was your, I suppose, content journey? What did that look like? What content did you engage with? What did you read? Did you look at product calculators, comparison tools, blog posts, specific product pages? Are we capturing that data? Does that allow us to define who a prospective customer type is based on location, based on campaign engaged with, based on products that you've looked at and explored and returned and did a bit more research about? Because ultimately, those data points allow us to begin to pick up those signals and interest points for those customers. And those are the, I suppose, raw ingredients that allow us to then, as a marketing team, go away and as part of our testing plans and ideas plans for the quarter ahead, look at what could that optimal experience look like for each of those customer types who've engaged with us at certain points. So for first-time visitors or returning visitors or people engaged with a campaign, if we knew XYZ data points, what type of in-moment experience would we like to deliver? Whether that's, personalizing our homepage based on copy and imagery related to something they've looked at before, right through to simplifying form completion in order to remove as much friction as possible so they can complete their journey and become a customer or an interested customer in your product or service. So that brings us to the end of today's session. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. So I'm just going to have a quick look to see what has come through. Feel free to pop your questions here in the toolbar if you have anything you'd like to ask. Okay, first question. You talked about single customer views earlier. Is that a must-have requirement to achieving the items you covered off today? No, not really. I suppose the way to look at it is there's the ideal world and there's the world we all live in. In the ideal world, we would connect to our different channels. We'd have a custom data platform that's capturing data from all our different channels and giving it to marketers in a way that they can extract the insights to deliver the experience they want to deliver. But in reality that is you're most likely not at that point in your digital journey. So the short answer is no. So what we would look at is what data points you have, whether it's just analytics or access to different tools that you have. Just look at what you have and look at what does that give us in terms of insight into your customers, and use that as a starting place for delivering a better experience, but also working backwards, using that to help define what is a good experience for your customers, and then defining what should we change up on the site over the next couple of months. Let's have a look. We've got a few more questions coming in. We have a good understanding of who our customers are, but we would like to recognize these customers online. So yeah, I covered some of this during the presentation. I think this is the point where marketing technology does have its role to play in identifying customer segments. Google Analytics is going to be limited in terms of, I suppose, creating those customer segments. But again, I would say look at what tools you have in place and then look at where we can start from there in terms of do you have the right tools in place to begin to identify some customer segments, and then we can worry about what would an ideal analysis, I suppose, what would be a richer way of tracking those customers further down the line, but you can build that out into a more robust roadmap. What does another question coming in? What does good look like? Who have you seen do this really well? What does good like? I mean, good look like is different for different organizations. So one I've probably talked about with a number of people on this call is with a large global bank that we work with, who we work with them on I suppose, orchestrating an end-to-end customer journey. So their end goal is quite selfishly, it's to sell their products, whether it's a credit card or a bank account. And a lot of what we've done for them is around connecting the different technologies they have in place. So they've got tools like Adobe, Optimisely, Telium for things like customer data capture and things like that. And we work with them in terms of connecting the tools in the back end. So we have the raw, I suppose, data points that we need, and then using that to understand who their customers are, combining that with online customer research, and then delivering personalized experiences and scaling testing at scale. I mean, I could talk to you after the call about it in more detail. I mean, there's loads of examples out there of who's doing this well, and I think the key thing is to bring it down to someone who's similar to your organization. Another question, I think this is our final one for today. What's your favorite recommended tool for tracking user journeys on a Sitecore website? Don't have a favorite because there isn't one. I suppose are people who, so a bit of context. So Sitecore is a content management and customer marketing platform that's similar to other platforms such as Optimisely, Adobe, etc. And I suppose my understanding of this question is you have people engaging with your Sitecore content management website, and then you want to understand the best way of tracking those ongoing journeys. So in our experience, it tends to be a combination of, do we look at using the data you captured within Sitecore, if you have Sitecore's marketing analytics switched on, and combining that with your single source of marketing truth. For most of the organizations we come across, that tends to be Google. So we don't have a favorite. It's typically the path of least resistance. So we typically look to figure out what data you're capturing. And so it tends to be a combination of GA and the data you capture within Sitecore. As a separate note, it also depends on what you want to have as a single source of truth, because some customers will look to pull that data into a CRM system, whereas other customers want to pull into their content management system. In your example, Sitecore, there are other digital channels such as email, CRM data, etc. So in effect, Sitecore starts working as that single source of truth, but also starts operating more as a customer data platform. But again, there's loads of nuances around that, and happy to discuss that on offline. So that brings me to the end of today's presentation. If you have any more questions, feel free to drop these in, and can answer these offline in the next day or so. Just leaves me to say thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join today's webinar, and hoping to see you on the next presentation. So goodbye.